Hey, this is Connor with CongruentX, and today we are continuing our three-part series on how to start a career in PowerApps. In the last video, we built a model-driven app for us to manage our ice cream flavors and our costs. And today we're going to be building a Canvas app that we're going to kind of use as like a POS system. So when people come and buy ice cream, we're going to track their names, their orders, all that good stuff. Let's jump right in. Okay, so there's a few different ways we can create the Canvas app. For our use cases, we're going to go to App, New App, Canvas app. There are templates and things we can use, but since this is a learning adventure, we're going to kind of start from scratch. And when I'm picking a format for the Canvas app, you can either pick tablet or phone. I always pick tablet. That's for a few reasons. In our specific use case, we're trying to duplicate a kind of like a POS system. What I mean by that is if you go to a cashier, they usually have a tablet or a computer or something where they are, entering your order, calculating the price, controlling inventory and things like that. The second reason is in the settings. The settings are a little bit different. In the tablet layout, you can actually change the orientation to portrait, as in a phone layout, or you can change the size of the app. I don't believe you can do that in the phone version, or at least you couldn't a while ago. So when I'm building apps, I try to kind of just throw controls on the screen and slowly figure out where I want things to go. And then I get it a little bit more functional. And for our use case, we're going to keep things super, super simple. We're not going to, do anything too fancy. In the next two projects, we'll kind of progressively get more advanced in the development. So whenever we're thinking about UI design, we want to start with the end in mind. What I mean is the end user. So whoever's going to be using the app. We want to try to figure out the best use case for them and figure out how to get the technology to mold to them. Sometimes you can find yourself molding the users to the technology, which doesn't always end up great. So let's just kind of get our data onto the app. So I'm going to go to Insert. There's a couple different ways you can insert. You can insert from this left section over here by clicking the plus button and seeing the insert. Or there's also a insert ribbon where you can insert controls from there too. To show a list of things, we're going to use a gallery. And in our case, we'll use a blank vertical gallery. Just going to stretch this out, give us a little bit more space here. And the first thing we're going to do to our gallery is set the data source so it knows what items it's showing. Again, multiple ways to do this. The easiest way I teach it is to use the Properties tab here in the right side, and under data source, you can see it already knows that we've added our ice cream flavors data source. If you're not seeing this here, you can always add your data source to the app by going to this tab and clicking add data. I think you can add it directly from here, but I'm not totally sure. We're going to select a view as well, which we covered views in the last episode. Now that we have our data source, we need to define, okay, for each thing, in this case, our ice cream flavors table, what do we want this to look like? There's a couple ways that you can click into a gallery. It can be a little bit tricky. What I tend to do is click on the gallery, and if it's empty like this, there's two things you can do. You can hit the edit pencil button, or you can click right on this text here. And you can see it kind of selected this smaller section. And if we go to insert and hit label, you can see our label is in our gallery. And we can tell because there's, we added one label, but there's multiple different labels showing. Something that you might find sometimes is if you're trying to add a control to a gallery, like if I wasn't selected on the gallery and I add the label, it's not actually in the gallery. And you can tell by looking at the tree view, you can see the label and the gallery are in the same position horizontally. This label is in our gallery, and it's actually tabbed next to our gallery. So it's inside our gallery. That sometimes can be a little confusing. We can see that the Canvas app automatically set a value for our label. So in our label, in our text property, you can see it is this item.name. And all that means is, for each item, we're going to show the name property or the name field, right? Name, column, there's a billion different ways to say it. So I'm just gonna throw a couple labels on here, and I'm just copying and pasting the control to easily add multiple controls. And I'm gonna just add a couple things here and start rearranging them to see what we may or may not want to see in our gallery. And what I'm doing here is I don't totally remember what fields we added. So after this item, if I press period, you actually can see a list of all the available fields. So our main fields are the name of the flavor, the cost, and the price. And I think in the context of our POS, we really only care about the price. So we'll get rid of the cost. And just super simply, now we have a list of our flavors and the price. Now you're noticing the price is stored as just a number. To make it look like a currency, we have to do a little bit of work to it. So what we're gonna do is wrap our value, our currency type value, in a text function. And the text function does kind of two main things. It converts non-text values into text values, and it also can output specific formats of text. So if you think like dates, right? There's 1,000 different ways that you can write a date. The text function can help you define how you want values to show. So here I'm going to define how I want this value to look. And we can dive a little bit deeper on this in another video, but I'm going to keep us moving here. So now I've defined how I want that value to look. And for me, I'm going to add a background to each item in the gallery. And again, I'm going to select into my gallery and go to layout and select container. I like the containers because they've got a new drop shadow option where you can have a little bit of a shadow behind your container, which I like. The border radius is the corners of the control. So you can see there's a little bit of a curve to it. I'm going to increase that just a little bit. And you'll notice that our container is on top of our labels. There's two ways we could do this. We could just reorder the container and send it to the back. So now our labels are on top of our container. I'm actually going to copy and paste these labels inside of our container because that's kind of what containers are for. You'll see we've got some errors here. So by default, when you add most controls inside of a gallery, it updates the onSelect property. So when a user clicks on the label, it updates it to select the parent. Because we've put these labels inside a container, this doesn't work. What you have to do is say select gallery 1 instead of the parent. And this would be whatever the name of your gallery is. This looks a little nicer. This looks like a clickable area to me. This looks like this would do something if I click on it. And I'm going to continue to mess with the formatting here a little bit. We can kind of do this together. I think I want this title centered. So I'll use the text alignment over here. And we'll put the price centered too. I mean, there's not a whole lot we're going to show here. And maybe we'll make the name of the ice cream bold under the font weight section. And actually, I like this. I like the idea of having the label in the middle here and just having the price in the lower right. So when we're thinking about how this is going to work, I'm giving somebody ice cream. Somebody's just ordered something and I'm trying to enter this into my system. I'm probably going to be working with one hand and I might be wearing a glove or something. So we need to be considerate of that when we're designing this app. One way you could do this is, you could order multiple scoops of something, right? Our pricing is per scoop. So if somebody ordered 3 scoops of cake batter, we could put like a text input in the gallery like this and have the user enter how many scoops they want to add to this order. But it's probably going to be difficult for the employee to kind of type this in if they're wearing gloves, like I said, or kind of while they're making the ice cream. So what I think we're going to do is actually have 3 different buttons for each flavor. One's going to be 1 scoop, 2 scoop, and 3 scoop. So let's extend our gallery just a little bit and shrink the size of our containers, right? Because now we need 3 buttons. And we'll readjust our labels here. And actually, let's keep this our main button. And maybe we'll add buttons inside of this. So let's say we have cake batter at the top here, like this. And I'm going to just move this label over here for now. And let's add 3 buttons inside of here. We'll have one for 1 scoop, 2 scoops, and 3 scoops. And again, I'm just copy and pasting the controls. I'm going to move the price up towards the top, I think. Okay, so I think this is a pretty good layout. You know, we've got each section of our flavors, and we can easily press 1 scoop, 2 scoop, or 3 scoop of each flavor without having to type something in or whatever. Now, I'm not loving the look of the blue, so let's go ahead and style our buttons. And what I'm doing here is I'm clicking and holding Shift and selecting all 3 of my buttons so I can change how they look at the same time. I'm not a huge fan of borders, so I'm gonna get rid of the border and change the color of the border to transparent. And I'm also not loving the color. Never been a big fan of the default blue. It's a little dark for me. So I think what we're gonna do is maybe lighten up this color a little bit. And now that we've lightened the background color, the text is a little harder to read. So let's try shifting to a black color. And the last thing I'm going to do is change the hover properties. So when if we play the app and hover over the buttons, we get a pretty aggressive hover effect here, which on a tablet you're not really going to notice. But for me, I like to change it. We're going to change the hover fill, and you can see what's happening here is this color fade function, which is just applying a brightness or darkness to an existing color. And our existing color is this RGBA value. And in this case, I actually just want to reference the fill color we already picked. So I'm going to use self to refer to the control itself and use dot notation to get to our fill property. So what this is going to do is fade the color of the fill by 20%. And in this case, it's darkening. If we were to get rid of this negative and use positive 20%, it's going to lighten our fill color. And we're going to adjust the hover color. I just always want this to be the regular color. I don't need the text of the button to change, really. And the last value you're going to change is the pressed value. So you have your stationary colors, you have your hover colors, and your pressed colors. So let's go to our pressed color. By default, it's going to be self.fill. I want it to be self.color. Again, I don't really want it to change on pressed fill. Again, I don't really want it to change. We're just going to do self.fill. Keeping it real simple. So now you can see how this is working. We've got our list of flavors, we've got the price of those flavors, and then we can easily pick how many scoops the customer ordered. Okay, so we have the ability to see our flavors and things. Now we need to think about building out the order. So, if I click these buttons, nothing happens. Whenever these buttons are pressed, we need to do something. And we're going to use collections to do that. So let's hop into our first button and go into the onSelect property. So when this button is pressed, what's going to happen? The function we're going to use is called clear. Well, actually, it's called collect. Clear collect is another function, but what that does is clear our collection of things every time it runs, which you don't want. We want to be able to add multiple things. So when we're looking at formulas, something that's helpful is this little prompt up at the top. You can see by the bold section, it's telling us what each property, what each parameter of this function wants. This first parameter is called collection, and it's just asking for the name of the collection we want to create. In our case, let's say, well, let's call it new order. Each parameter that a function wants is separated by a comma. So once we type in a comma, now we've moved on to the second parameter. And you can kind of think of parameters as an input, right? Functions are just inputs and outputs. The second input for our collection is going to be the item. And you can see it says a record or table to collect. In our case, it's going to be a record or one row that we're going to add to our collection. For this video, I'm going to try to do it the most simple way I can think of. So to define a record, we're going to use curly brackets. And just to keep it formatted, I'm going to separate them. And the formatting for a record in PowerApps is you type in the name of the field or column. So we know we're going to want to track what flavor was ordered. And you use a colon. And then you type the value of that column. In our case, there's a couple different ways we could store the flavor. I think the easiest thing to do for us is going to be to just put this item. And what that's going to do is this column, flavor, is going to be a record value. So we're just storing the current flavor in our record. We know we want to store the quantity. We'll call it scoops. Each new field or column in our record is separated by a comma. So we'll move to our next parameter, which is scoops. And this is going to be based on the button. So because we're selected on this first button, we can just hard code this as 1. And that's it. So whenever we press this first button, it's going to add a new record to our new order collection that's going to save, you could think of it that way, the flavor as the current item, so the current record of flavor, and it's going to save the number of scoops. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste this into each button and change the scoop value. And I messed up here. You don't need to wrap the name of the collection in a string value. It wants just unwrapped text. Okay, so I've copied and pasted our code to our 3 buttons. So if we select each button, you can see we got 1 scoop, 2 scoop, and 3 scoop. Let's test this out quickly. If I click on 1 scoop under cake batter, you'll see nothing really happens. But behind the scenes, a collection has been created and our value is there. There's a couple different ways we can visualize this. One of the easier ways is to go into the Variables tab, go under Collections, and you'll see our new order collection is here, and view the table. You can see we have our 2 properties. We have our flavor, which is a record, which is indicated by this little icon, and we have our scoops. And if we click into flavor, you can see this is actually our record in Dataverse, which is being saved with all of the columns. So we probably need a way to show this collection to the user so they can see what they've added. And we're going to use another gallery to do that. Again, we'll go to blank vertical gallery. And this time we'll put it on the right side of the screen. And our data source this time is going to be our local collection. We'll click on New Order, click into our gallery, and we'll start adding labels, just like we did before. To hopefully help you understand how the record is being stored, if you can see we have this item.scoops, and it's showing the number. If we do this item.flavor, you see we get a little red squiggly. And that's because this is a record value. If we want to actually show a value in this label, we have to drill into a specific field. And here, this looks just like our other gallery, where now we have a list of all the fields in our ice cream flavor table. In our case, we'll just show the name of the flavor. So if I hold Alt, and we can interact with the app without having to play the app, as we click on new things, you can see they get added to our collection. And I'm going to make our gallery a bit smaller here, so this is a little more compact. There we go. That looks good. We'll scoot it over a little bit more. I'm going to maybe make the quantity bold, and we'll scoot this down a little bit. And I'd like a label, I think, above here. That's just going to say order. We'll make the font a little bigger, and we'll scoot our gallery up a little bit, make it a little smaller. There we go. And I think something else that could be good for us to do is show the price of each item that we're adding. We'll add one more label, set it to right justified. Again, there's multiple ways you could do this. I think the easiest way is to take the number of scoops and multiply it by the price of that flavor. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to just do it directly in the label. So you can see this item.scoops is returning a number. So we can actually write in the label, just say this item.scoops times this item dot flavor. Again, this is a record. Can't multiply something by a record. So we need to go into the price. And there, you can see it's calculating in real time the price of each line. And again, I think we want to duplicate that currency formatting. So now we've got the order displayed. You can see I added it to I just copy and pasted our controls into a container so we could have this nice drop shadow to kind of separate things. We probably want to show the order total. So I'm going to copy this label into our container. We'll change the wording to total. We'll shrink the size just a little bit. And in this label, we need to calculate the sum of our order. So again, there's a couple ways we could do this. I think the easiest way is to just calculate it directly in the label. So we've got our total. And the way I like to create dynamic strings is I use this little, you can kind of think of it like a S string in JavaScript if you're not familiar. It's just an easy way to write dynamic text values. So instead of having total, then adding a space, then, adding our value, whatever that might be, we can actually just use this money sign and use brackets to indicate we want some sort of dynamic value here. So in our case, we want to calculate the sum of our order. So we will use the sum function. The first parameter is asking for a number. The way this function works is you can either, enter a bunch of different numbers in it, or you can feed the first parameter a table. In our case, that's going to be new order, our collection. And the second parameter is going to be the name of the column that you want to add, which in our case is going to be, there's going to be the scoops times flavor, not price. Can you do that? Oh, you can do that. Huh. In our case, it's going to be the scoops times the flavor dot price, right? Again, because flavor is the record, we have to actually dive into the price itself. Again, we're going to need to format this in a currency. Would be nice if the currency values would kind of automatically do this, huh? I'd like to right justify this as well. Bring it down a little bit, and we'll adjust the padding. So on the far right side, I want a little bit more space than 5 pixels. Let's try like 25 pixels. There we go. That looks good to me. Now that we're seeing the order in a pretty decent way, there's two things that I think we need to solve for. The first thing is selecting a customer, right? That was one of the things that we talked about. And the second is actually saving this data. Because right now, all of this data is just living in a container locally in the device. It's not actually saved to Dataverse yet. Let's start with selecting the customer. Let's add another container, because I always like to kind of separate stuff. When we're thinking about someone that's working at a cash register, they need to be able to move quickly, right? We want an easy way for the cashier to both select someone that already exists in the system and create someone new on the fly. We're going to do a little bit of wizardry to try to make this as easy as possible. So let's add some inputs, right? Not labels, inputs, because we want the cashier to be able to actually type in a person's name if they need to. I think the flow I'm going to look for here is the cashier will start typing in the person's name, and they'll have the ability to select that person if they already exist. If not, we're going to dynamically use that name to create a new contact in the system. To have that kind of searchable drop-down functionality, we're going to use the combo box control. So let's make sure allow searching is on. Once the user has selected a customer in the system, we want to display things like the email and the phone number so they can either edit those things if they're in conversation with the customer and they say, actually, my number's different. We could update that from here. The email, I'm going to get rid of the default value here. We don't need that just yet. In the hint text, just so we can see what's supposed to go here, I'm going to type in email. I will copy and paste. Type in phone, just to keep things super, super simple. Now, the way we want this to work is if you select a customer in the system, I want to be able to see the current email and or phone number for that individual. The way we're going to do that is to use the default property of these input text boxes. Right now you can see it's blank. So to reference the value we've selected, I'm going to copy and paste the name of our combo box control, hop into our default, paste that, and once we've got the control referenced, we can use dot notation to access different things in that control. The thing we want is the selected item, which gets us to the record, the contact record in the system that we've selected. And then we want to access the email address. So now, if I were to select someone in the system that has an email address, you can see it autofills here, which is really nice. But I can also still edit it if I need to. You'll see as I change the email address, it does update. There's only one letter difference because this is sample data. So we'll just copy and paste the same thing we did here into our phone number control, and we'll just change the property to, I think we use mobile phone. And let's check our system. I don't know that we have anyone that has a mobile phone value. Yeah, they're all empty, so that won't populate just yet. The last thing we're going to do is, instead of this saying find items, I want it to say enter customer name. And I'm going to copy that both into the input text placeholder and into the no selection text. They're actually slightly different. All right, now we're getting somewhere. The last step is to save our order. Because again, all of this information is just living in our app. We want to save that back to our database. So to do that, we're going to add one simple button. And since I've already got the styling of a button set, I'm just going to copy and paste it. It's going to fuss at me because of the formulas that are already in there referencing this item. Because now this button is outside of a gallery, this item doesn't mean anything. So we'll just remove that and we should be good. We're going to change our text to submit order. And let's maybe change the colors of these to make it more apparent that it does something different. Maybe we'll make it some kind of green color that'll go with our existing color. That's not a great color. I'm not great with colors. That's okay. That's fine for our purposes. You guys will probably build something prettier than me. Okay, let's talk about patching. Patching is, when I see people start their Power Platform journey, a lot of times I see them get trapped into using the edit form control. And the edit form control is an out-of-the-box control that does make creating and editing records pretty easy. But I think it kind of stands in the way a little bit of learning how this stuff actually works. Because there are a lot of limitations and, at least from my perspective, annoyances with this control. I like to just keep things simple and have more control over how things are going to look and behave. So we're going to manually patch things in. So just to learn how the patch function works, I'm going to write a really simple patch in to demonstrate how this works. So the function is called patch. The first parameter is the source. So where do we want to create something? And that's going to be in our, I think we called it purchases data source. And we haven't added this data source to our app yet. So we're going to hop into our data tab and add it. Now you'll see it'll quit yelling at me. The patch function can either be used to create or update records. In our case, we're going to be creating. The second parameter defines which of those things you're doing. The second parameter, if you are creating something new, you're going to use the defaults function and put the purchases data source in here, or whatever your data source is. Don't ask me what it does. I don't totally understand. To put it simply, it helps define the shape of the record that you are creating. Meaning what columns are there, what data types those columns are supposed to be. That's my understanding. Not super important to grasp. Just remember, you got to put defaults if you want to create something new. The third parent before that, if we are trying to update a record, we would put here the record we're trying to update. So we could use something like a lookup function to go grab the record we're trying to get. Or if we have that record already stored, like as a variable, we could just put that variable here. Again, in our case, we're just creating a new record, so defaults is what we're going to use. The third parameter is going to be the update, or the actual value of the record that we're creating, which again, to define a record in PowerApps, you're going to use curly brackets. And the formatting is column name, colon, value, and then comma, repeat, rinse and repeat. Let's look back to our purchases table and see what things we need to patch in. We know we need to set the ice cream flavor. We know we need to set a quantity, and we know we need to set the customer. One thing I didn't think about when we built this table was we probably want to store the amount the customer purchased that specific flavor for, right? Because we're storing at an instance what the cost and price of a flavor is, but that could change over time, right? So if we're storing purchases, we probably want to know how much they paid at that point in time versus, for this purchase example, we don't know how much the user paid. We could dive into the ice cream flavor itself and see, but that's not necessarily the price they paid for that ice cream. That said, we're going to add a new column to our purchases table that's going to let us store the total that the customer paid. So let's hop into our solution, navigate to our purchases table, and we're going to add a column that's going to be the price. And you could either store the total price. So for example, this purchase line here that is 2 cake batter scoops, we could either store $4.30, or we could store the cost at the time per scoop. I think in our case, to just keep it simple, we're just going to store the total. So we'll just do total price. We're going to say that this is a currency, and this field's going to be required, meaning you can't create a purchase without setting a total price. In our previous videos, you guys should already know how to do this, but I'm going to off camera add these to our form and our views so we can see those values. Since we made a change to our database, I'm going to hop into our data tab and refresh our purchases table so we can make sure we are getting all of the available updates. Okay, back to our patch statement. We know when we're creating a purchase, we need to set the quantity. So if I start typing, you should see that the existing columns in the database will pop up as values. So here I'm going to set the quantity. For now, I'm just going to hard code the values so we can try to wrap our heads around how the patch statement works, and then we'll adapt it to actually pull the data to actually store the data we want. So let's say the quantity is 2. We'll add a comma to indicate, hey, we got a new line that we have a new column that we're adding information to. The second piece of information is going to be our flavor, which is called ice cream flavor. And here, instead of a text value or a string value, we're going to use a record value. Again, we'll do this a little bit differently later on, but to just keep it super, super simple, we're going to hard code this. So since this is a lookup field, meaning this field on our purchase table is looking up a value on another table, we need to put a record from our ice cream flavor table in this value. So if I just type in our ice cream flavors table, you'll see it's going to fuss at me. And the reason is it says, hey, this ice cream flavor column is expecting a record. You gave it a table. There's a couple different ways we could get down to a specific record. One easy way is just to use the first function, which is just going to return the first value, the first row in our ice cream flavor table. Or we can use lookup, which lookup is a function that allows you to look up a specific record in a table. The first parameter in the lookup function is the source, which in our case is going to be ice cream flavors. The second parameter is the condition. So how am I looking this up? In our case, we want the name of the ice cream to equal vanilla. Again, just using something random here. And you'll see the function is happy with me because the lookup function has returned a record. So we're feeding a record into this column. We know we want to store the total price. Again, I'm just going to put a value here. We'll make this dynamic in a second. And the last piece is the customer. So same concept as the ice cream flavor, except here I'm just going to put the first record in the contacts table. I don't care who it is for now, right? We're just demonstrating this. So if I press this button, we're going to create a new record in the purchases table. If we hop into our model-driven app, look at our purchases, you can see here's our new purchase, 7/6/2023. We have our new purchase. Our customer is related. So if we jump into this record here, our customer is here and our flavor is here. Okay, now let's make this dynamic, right? Let's not hard code this. We want this to actually save the orders that we've added in our app. So the way that we're doing it here is each line is a specific purchase. So this first line, this 1 scoop of cake batter, that's a purchase. The second is 2 scoops of cake batter, that's a second purchase. Because in our case, if you think about it, one person can order multiple things. So to make this work the way we want, we kind of need to say for all of these orders that we created, we need to create or patch a record in our purchase table. And to do that, we're going to write our function exactly how we just spoke it. For all is the function we're going to use to loop across some table, right? And that table is going to be our new orders collection, right? So we've got this collection of orders, which in our case is these 3 different orders. And for each order, we want to create a purchase in our system. So the first parameter is our source. The second parameter for all is going to be the action you're taking per row. And what I like to do to make it super, super simple is I use the as operator to set what's called a context variable. And what that means is within each loop, it's just an easy way for us to reference this current thing. So, we've got 3 orders. We're starting on the first order. We need to be able to say, create a purchase. This purchase is quantity. This purchase is flavor, etc., etc. So we're going to put new order as this order. And here I'm just defining what the name is going to be. This will make a little bit more sense as we write out the formula. So for each new order, we're going to patch a purchase. And again, we're only going to be creating new records. So we'll use defaults. And now we need to define what the values are. So for our quantity field that we're patching, where's that quantity coming from? Well, for each new order, it's going to come from this order's scoops, right? Because we stored the number of scoops. Next, we are going to store the total price. That's not actually stored anywhere, right? We just have that in the label. So we need to do this calculation again. Again, probably not the most optimal way to do it, but in terms of learning, I think this is a good way to do it. So for the total price, we want to take this order's flavor dot price, right? Because we want the flavor's price times this order's scoops, right? The number of scoops ordered. And that's going to do that calculation and save that value in the total price. Now we need to patch the flavor column. Because in our collection, we stored the flavor as a record, we can actually just reference this order dot flavor. So it's mad at me, but it's because the column name is not correct. And if you didn't store your ice cream flavor as a whole record, you could do like a lookup like we did earlier and say, look up ice cream flavors where the name of the flavor is equal to this order's flavor, if you're just storing a name. The last piece, we're going to start out simple, and then we will get a little bit more complicated. So this last piece, I'm actually going to do this in a different button, and we will bring it back over here, right? Because we still need to set the customer. So I'm going to just add this temporary button just to keep things a little bit simpler to look at. In this button, we're going to figure out what we're going to do with these customers, right? Because we want it to be smart. We want to be able to either select a customer or create a new one if one doesn't already exist. To do that, we're going to reference this combo box and say if the combo box dot selected is blank is a function that just returns true or false if the thing you put inside the function is blank or not. Let's start with is not blank. So if the user actually selects someone in the combo box, we're just going to use the value they selected. So combo box dot selected. If not, we're going to create a new contact. And again, same thing. We're going to patch contacts where the defaults is the second parameter. And what we're going to patch is we need to patch into the first name field and the last name field. And it's going to be a little tricky, right? Because we're trying to make this intuitive if we can. So for instance, myself, I'm not in the system. So let's say the user types in Connor Ingram, right? Nothing's found, nothing's selected. I'm going to throw a label on here to kind of show you what I mean. And this is something I do when I'm building apps all the time. I throw a bunch of stuff on the screen to help kind of break each piece into smaller pieces and then put it all together. So if I reference this combo box and I say dot selected and then use dot notation to show a specific field like the full name, you see there's nothing here, right? It's totally blank. There's nothing selected. But the combo box control does return the search text, which I've entered Connor Ingram. So 9 times out of 10, we're going to be able to split what the user enters in this search into the first name and last name. And to do that, we're going to use the split function, which the first parameter is the text that we want to split. The second parameter is the separator. So whatever we want to separate these two things by. In our case, that's going to be a space. So we're going to take the space and split the text into two things. We're going to, in our case, we'll have Connor and then we'll have Ingram. So you can see the split returns a table. And we can't show a table value in a label. So if we look at the first item that the split results in, we use dot notation and select the value. You see it says Connor. And we can use the last to see the second value is Ingram. So now I've shown you how we're going to split whatever the user searched by into a first and last name. So again, just kind of breaking this up into multiple steps. I'm going to copy this value I have in this label because I know that's what I want to patch into the first name. And we'll do the same thing for last name, except we'll update this function to be last because we don't want the first split value. We want the second split value. And you can kind of just confirm this by hovering over it. If you highlight the value, you can see it says Connor. The second value is Ingram. We also want the option to patch in the email, which will be this text input. So I'm just going to copy and paste that control. And for a text input, we have a couple different properties we can access. But to access whatever the user typed in, we're going to use the text property. So text input 3.text. And finally, we're going to patch the mobile phone value based on the phone input control we created. Now, what we've done here is written out what we said earlier. We want to be able to either select something from our combo box, meaning if our combo box dot selected isn't blank, we're going to use the combo box.selected. If it's not blank, we're going to patch a new contact and use that value. So now that we've kind of broken this down in this separate button, let's figure out how to integrate that into our main submit order button. There's a few ways you could do this. To keep it simple, we're going to use a variable. So we're going to copy and paste this code that we wrote here, and we're going to say update context, which update context is a function that allows you to create variables. And again, just like a collection, a variable is something that is stored locally in the app. And the formatting is, again, a record formatting. So in update context, the first part of our record is going to be the name of our variable, which is going to be order contact. And we'll use a colon. And then we're going to set the value of order contact. And in our case, we want order contact to either be the contact the user selected or the contact we are creating. And actually, let's just move this to the separate button and totally do it here, just so we can isolate this functionality. So let's copy this and move it inside of our update context. To break this down before we test it, we're going to create a variable named order contact, and the value of that variable, if someone selects something in our combo box, selects a customer in the box, is just going to be the selected contact, or it's going to be this new contact we're creating. So this might be a little confusing. By putting the patch statement here, a patch statement always returns the record that was either updated or created. So combo box.selected is returning a contact record, and patch is returning also a contact record. So let's test this out. Let's update our label to order contact. And again, it's going to be a record, so we'll just use full name. To test this out, let's start with something that's selected. So let's select Jim Glenn. When I hit this button, that's actually set our variable to Jim Glenn. Let's try to create something new. If I do Connor Ingram, again, nothing selected. I've just typed that in. If I hit my button, you can see it's taking a second. It went and patched to Dataverse and stored the result of that record as my variable. So if we go into our contacts, you can see Connor Ingram has been added as a contact in our system. All right, now let's put it all together. We're going to copy our variable and just put it directly above our for all patch statement. We'll get rid of our button. Now, so PowerApps generally works from top to bottom in terms of when it does things. So we're going to set our variable called order contacts, and we're going to use that variable when creating each of our purchases. The final step in our patch statement is to set the customer, which the value of that is going to be our order. What do we call it? Order contact. Yeah. Order contact. So let's try this out. Let's see if it works. Let's play the app. Let's do each scenario in terms of the customer so we can kind of see how that's working. So let's select someone that already exists, Nancy Anderson, and press submit order. If we go look in our database of purchases, we should see we now have 3 purchases where the customer is Nancy. You can see we got 1 cake batter, we got 2 cake batter, and 2 mint chocolate chip. And the total price is also getting stored. Before we try another order, you'll notice nothing really happened in the app, right? Our order's still here. There's no good way to reset. So let's add that functionality in. Let's add a separate button. So in our second button, the first thing we're going to want to do is clear new order, right? This is our collection of purchases, and we're going to want to reset that, clear it out, and we'll use the clear function to do that. The second thing we need to do is reset these input controls, right? Because we don't want the previous customer to stay selected. We don't want the email to stay the same and such. So we're going to grab the combo box, and for each of our input controls, we're just going to put them in this reset function. So now, when we press our reset button, all of our stuff clears out, which is great. To make sure this happens after we order something, we're just going to copy the name of our reset button and use the select function to select that button. This is a great way to keep from repeating yourself, right? So instead of, typing out clear new orders, reset controls all over again, we can actually have our submit button press our reset button. Let's build out an order again, and this time we're going to have it create a new customer, and then also we'll kind of test out this reset functionality. So let's say it's going to be a big order. 3 scoops of vanilla, 2 scoops of mint chocolate chip. We're going 2 scoops of cake batter and 2 scoops of chocolate. In our customer, this is a new customer. It's going to be the king himself. He's not giving us his email or phone number, unfortunately, but he is buying quite a lot of ice cream from us. So we'll submit this order. You can see everything reset. And let's hop into our app and refresh. And we should see we now have 4 new purchases from the king of rock and roll himself. The last step here is just to save our app. Once you create an app, it should auto-save as you go. But just keep that in mind if you're not saving. And then we're going to publish. Publishing is pushing the current version of an app live. There's a saved version of your app, which you can use without other people seeing. And then there's the published version of your app, which if you were to play the app on your phone or on a tablet, that's the version you're going to see. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching this longer episode. Stick around because in the next video, we're going to go over some cool automation. We're going to send some automated thank yous for purchases. We're going to send some automated coupons. It's going to be super cool. As always, please like and subscribe if you found this valuable, and feel free to reach out to us at congruentx.com, and we'll see you in the next one.